Yes, thank you. Good morning. Well, we are a law firm, so we have a view on what are the main aspects related to the legal environment, of course. And with respect to the Italian market, there is a huge difference between what is purely healthcare, which is very much regulated, and very much supported by the government, and what is senior living, which is something nowadays completely private, not regulated, basically, where there is a lot of interest because it's a market completely undeveloped, I would say, or with a very few development. Because historically, Italy has been a country where families were very present, supporting the senior people, but the situation in the society is changing quickly, and more there is a need of senior people, finding the right place where to live. So there is big interest now of investors developing this kind of new way of living, but they are also facing with some elements to be understood. One is the lease law, which address some elements, but that does not address properly perhaps the fact that you can find a housing where the level of services is very high, and so you are not only paying for the location, but you are also paying for the services, and these are two elements that need to be coupled in order for having the project to work. And the second is on taxation, where there is a huge difference in taxation, whether it is pure leasing, or if it is an hotel accommodation, or if it is a lease made by a private. Taxation is very different, so it can change a business plan dramatically, depending on how you address it, and these are the other elements on which the operators that are moving on this market are working very much.
Okay, good. We'll pick that up a little bit later as well. Matthias, just for those who don't know, give a little bit insight in terms of the healthcare side of Corpus Sireo, if you could.
Yes, right. My name is Matthias Schulgen. I'm portfolio manager at Corpus Sireo, and I'm head of the institutional funds team at Corpus Sireo, and we're currently managing 3 stock healthcare funds, one for nursing homes, one for assisted living, and one for medical office buildings, so for each major property type in the market. Corpus Sireo is part of Swiss Life Asset Managers. You might know Swiss Life Asset Manager is a huge European asset management platform, and therefore we're currently, with our local expertise, looking very much at a European approach. And the trends we are currently seeing in the healthcare markets are that healthcare is becoming a mainstream asset class, just like residential, office or retail, and there is severe demand for healthcare assets currently on the market.
Ron.
My name is Ron van Bloois. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm one of the 4 partners of HEVO. HEVO is a leading consultancy, project management and development company in the Netherlands. And we are mainly focused on healthcare and educational facilities. Next to that, I'm also a lecturer at the Amsterdam School of Real Estate on the topics of healthcare, finance and investments. My daily practice is also advising international investors to give an entrance to the Dutch market in investments. So it's a very interesting market, and I agree on Matthias that healthcare is becoming a mature investment market, so it's very interesting.
Okay, great. Alessandro.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alessandro Sparaco. I'm one of the founding partners of Threestones Capital. Threestones Capital is a management company, is a GP investing mainly in the long-term care sector. We started to invest in this sector in 2009, so this year is our 10th anniversary. We started in Germany, then we expanded also in Italy and Spain. Today we focus mainly on these spaces, so long-term care, senior housing and healthcare facilities, with a main focus on Germany.
Okay, great. So we've got a range of expert views here covering both Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, and also across both senior living but also healthcare. If you've got any questions, just let me know, raise your hands or shout them out, and we'll somehow make sure that those are dealt with. Let's just start with you. Why don't we start with you, Matthias? In terms of the key trends for healthcare, what are you seeing particularly in the German market?
let's say, concerning investment, we are currently seeing that not only healthcare-related investors are joining the market, but also property investors or financially driven investors are joining the healthcare market because of the long and stable lease contracts we are facing there. Let's say that's the trend on the investment market we are currently seeing, and I think it's a trend which is true for entire Europe. The trend on the building side is that we are currently seeing a lot of combined assets, which is a combination of assisted living and nursing homes. And if we add, let's say, some kind of medical office building, we're talking about local medical hubs we are seeing in the market right now.
Okay, that's interesting. And Alessandro, for you, what's the crossover between senior living and healthcare? Matthias there just mentioned that you'd got care homes moving into that. Where do you see the crossover point, or is it all part of one journey, I suppose, to a sense?
Let's say for senior housing, we see that senior housing is well developed in certain Nordic countries in Europe. In Germany, we have approximately 1,000 assisted living apartments. And today we have an occupancy which is very high. Of course, the relationship between senior housing, which is for self-sufficient people, and care homes and nursing homes that are for non-self-sufficient people, is very. Often people living in senior housing, then at the second stage they go to nursing homes. We are seeing a lot of developments now in southern countries like Italy and Spain. The market is less developed, but for sure the trend is growing a lot.
And do you see a similarity between, do you see more of a similarity between senior housing and, say, student housing or micro-living than you do between senior housing and then getting into care homes, healthcare? Where does that sit?
I like a lot also as an asset class student housing and micro-living. We also studied a lot this asset class. There are similarities. A niche asset class growing. The interest from investors is growing a lot. Like the senior housing and assisted living and nursing homes market. Just to give you an example, in Germany, when we started in 2009, the transaction volume was around 300 million. Today is about 2 billion. So the interest from investors has increased a lot, and we expect the same trend in student housing and micro-living.
And it's interesting. So this is the first time we've actually looked at senior housing and healthcare in any of these sessions at all. We started off doing student housing, I think, Torsten, maybe 5 years ago, something like that. And that was literally 12 people in a room here at MIPIM. And this year we had to rent a room in the Gare Maritime, and it was 400 people yesterday. So it's interesting to see where we'll be in 4 or 5 years' time with this. But we're already bigger than 8 people here, so that's a suggestion of where the market's going. Ron, what's your sense of it? I mean, we've seen in student housing, we've seen people like Union Investment, but also a number of the bigger core investors beginning to move into that space and make it more institutional. You mentioned a little bit about the healthcare sector becoming more institutional. What are you seeing, and how do you see that moving forward?
Well, I think the most important driver is the demographics. So aging demographics are immense. And we also see from the operator side that they have to redevelop their current portfolio. And there's also a shift from ownership. So mainly, for example, Dutch operators, they are used to be asset owner and operator. And they have a large-scale portfolio, but they've got some midlife renovations, and they can't pay them from their own balance sheet. So therefore, they have to go to investors. I think it's very interesting that you also see that the ticket sizes are increasing. So we're going from single asset deals to portfolio deals. So now we're talking about 100 million deals, and that's very important for institutional investors because they like sizes and tickets. So therefore, it's becoming a real mature investment market because of the size.
And Matthias, you wanted to pick that up, I think.
Yes, I wanted to add a few points from the investor side. From our point of view, there is still a nice yield spread concerning healthcare assets compared to the traditional asset classes like retail or office. We have a better cost structure due to the long lease contracts, which are mostly double net with the operator. And I think that we are looking at a good risk and income ratio at healthcare asset compared to the asset classes, and therefore the interest increases in healthcare assets due to it's more driven by demographics than by economic cycles that drive the retail or office investment market.
You've you've been working on some deals here. What's the situation in Italy? Are you seeing different types of investors beginning to look at the sector?
Yeah, it was interesting what you said before regarding student housing. The first move was on student housing, actually, and because that attracted more investors at the beginning. And now people are looking at the senior housing, because the perception was that student housing was a urgent need, while senior housing is something which becoming interesting in the future years. It is somehow a defensive or investment in the future, in the sense that more and more investors we speak to says that, well, interesting in retail is interesting, but the yield are not so interesting at the end. Office core, again, it's the same story. While if you are a first mover in a sector like senior housing in Italy, which is practically not developed compared to other European countries, that is the attractive element. To be the first mover, that create a position in the market, understand how the market could work based on the environment of Italy. So only few investors actually are looking at that asset class actively in Italy, because they need to learn how to do it. So we are not yet in the phase in Italy where many investors are looking at the asset class.
Okay, good. And welcome, Paola.
Thank you so much, and I really apologize for the delay.
No, we're very delighted that you can be here. So now is your chance to be able to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what CDP is doing, particularly in this area of kind of senior living, healthcare, and that side of it.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Paola Delmonte. I'm responsible for the business development of the management fund company of Cassa Depositi e Prestiti. Just a forward, Cassa Depositi e Prestiti is a private company, but belonging 80% to the Ministry of Treasury, of Finance. So we are a kind of quite strange operators, in the sense that we are a private operator, but we pursue always a public interest, and we also manage equity with a objective of returns which are low in comparison with the market required returns, in the sense that managing the savings, we have the chance to match the return that we give to the Italian savings with the returns that we require from our investment. In this sense, we have pursued for many years, I would say 8 to 10 years so far, a program of affordable housing. We have experienced in this program some what we call alternative, what you call alternative segments, which are senior housing, which are student housing. The major point is that with this experience we have moved a little bit forward and a little bit aside from the traditional assisted senior housing, which are the models which give priority to the, first of all, the self-sufficient elderly people, but with a mixing between various targets and various needs, going from the people which need heavy medical assistance, but also moving forward towards people, self-sufficient elderly people. Physically speaking, this project, this structure are organized and laid out in a way that there are places where the old people stay and are assisted, also medically speaking, 24 hours. But there are also houses which can be rented or even can be bought by self-sufficient people in a structure where they can benefit from the fact that they have also the medical assistance, or even simply by the fact that they can benefit from all the other services, including leisure, including sports. There are, of course, many models now, because they depends also on the models developed by the managers, the companies which manages the structure. We have a quite strong relation with a foundation which is called Opera Immacolata Concezione, which is a foundation based in Padua, which has developed this concept that the longevity is has to be seen not as a burden, but as a resource to create value for the society. And this is the reason why in their structure, called model Civitas Vitae, they use, quoted and quoted, the old people to integrate activities and services which are also, for example, dedicated to young people or to children, in order to make tangible and intangible results out of this longevity.
And that's quite interesting, I think, because there's been studies done across the UK as well about the link between actually senior living, but also then bringing younger people into that, and that everybody benefits. It would be good just to get from you, Alessandro, in terms of the trends that you're seeing from people who are, I guess, the guests or the people who are the seniors who are looking for that type of accommodation, that type of housing. What are they looking for? So what are they asking you for? What is it that people are actively looking for? Is it that sort of activities? What kind of things are they needing? Is it luxury? What's the demand from?
I think the demand is very different region by region. If we look, for instance, at Germany, we see a lot of demand not only from non-self-sufficient people, but also from people that are in good health, and they like to have a quality of life in a social environment that is more adapted compared to living alone in an apartment. If we look at Italy and Spain, where families are still an important factor in taking care of the elderly, the nursing homes are more for people that they really need care. I started to look at this market personally in 2006. At that time I was working in Geneva, Switzerland, in a family office, and we studied all the European markets. At that time we chose Germany because the system of funding of the long-term care was very efficient. It's covered by a mandatory long-term care insurance. And we looked at Italy and Spain, for instance, and we didn't like the fact that the system is covered by the public fund through the regions. Now, if I look at the market in Italy and Spain, I think we always speak very badly about governments and local authorities. In Italy, this has improved a lot. The government has improved a lot, for instance, the system of payments of the region. The timing has decreased a lot. What was the main barrier for investors is not anymore there. So I see, for instance, today, if I see Italy and Spain, those are the countries offering the most of the opportunities. There's a strong lack of bets. And what was the question? The senior housing and people that are self-sufficient, that didn't like to go in facilities, now they are starting, because also the quality of facility is changing. Still, a big part of the market is made of inefficient and poor quality facilities, but this is also improving a lot.
And how much of that market is made up of, I suppose, people who are renting and people who are buying?
Let's say most of the market is still for renting, especially in senior housing, nursing homes, they rent. Let's say operators of nursing homes are growing. The market is growing because of mainly of demographic and social changes. Operators are also growing. So they started investing in the real estate. Now, to cover their growth, they need to rent. So the trend is mainly on renting and probably acquiring new properties in partnership with real estate investors.
And one of the issues, Ron, that often comes up in the discussions that we've been having is this really a real estate investment, or are you taking on massive operator risk? You know, do you have to become a healthcare operator in order to be able to invest in the underlying real estate? Is that something that you're having to tackle from investors in terms of a view and encouraging more institutional capital to come into the market?
Well, I think you always look to your operator side, but I don't agree that you've got more risk. I think you try to find a very good partnership, and that's also why I believe in healthcare. It's a quite natural partnership, actually with two parties with the same purpose, like improve the life of people. So therefore I think it's interesting for the operator side and also for the investor to make impact on people's lives. So and one of my personal targets is that it became normal to invest in healthcare, because it's actually about living of normal people, elderly people, disabled people, etc. So that's also my question to all these people in the room. Let's look at healthcare as a normal business case, normal asset category, and find a partnership.
So if I may add a concept, there are, of course, as always, two different models, such as in student housing or even in hospitality. The integrated model, in which the ultimate operator decides to be integrated along the whole cycle and decides to invest and buy the structure and be owner of the structure, of the real estate component. And there is what I call probably it's not correct, the disintegrated model, in which, as in hospitality, as in student housing and in senior living, you have the financial investors. But of course, you have the real estate component and the real estate investor, which obviously has to assess the investment, taking into account a number of factors, including the reversibility, for example, of the project. In the case, at some points, it is no longer a senior living complex, but it has to become a pure residential complex, or a student housing complex, or whatever else. And in this model, financial investor, real estate investor, it is essential, of course, to have a strong partnership with the senior housing manager, with the operator, which could be itself both an integrated operator, but also an operator which leases, rents, structure of real estate investors. And in this case, obviously, what is important is to fix the parameters of the agreement, which at the end is a lease agreement, but it's much more complex because, of course, it's a lease agreement between a real estate investor and an operator which use the structure for its own business.
But maybe I can add, because I don't totally agree with you, but because I think that investment managers and asset managers also add value to this proposition. Because when I look at the investor side, these are professional partners who do asset management, portfolio management. These are the core business of the investment manager. So that's why, to my opinion, it's a very strong partnership, because the operator's core business is providing care and providing services. And the core business of investment manager is doing your asset management on professional level. So I think it's more valued than just that it's a leasing contract.
It is exactly what I was trying to say. It is not a simple lease agreement, but it is an agreement between a real estate provider and the business operator.
Good that you do agree. That's good. Matthias.
I just wanted to say that I agree with both of you.
The models are different, but both are extremely valid and extremely
Matthias.
I think before investing in healthcare assets, due diligence is crucial, as in every asset class, and I think what everybody does is to have a depth insight or look through on the on the operator's business model. If you are only investing in the bricks and the lease contract, you're looking at the location and the visibility of the building, but I think the building, this is quite limited because of the legal regulations you have in every country. So it's mostly about analyzing the location, the operator, and the business model to get an impression whether it is sustainable concerning the location and the asset class.
And you mentioned, Davide, you wanted to pick that up, but also there was something I think that you felt was important for international investors looking at the Italian market in terms of particularly the senior living side.
Yeah, no. Well, no, if I may add to this point that was being discussed, I see this asset class similar to other asset class where the property element is one of the elements, but is not the full package of the investment. So you, as somebody says, you may have the investor that is looking only on the property element. In Italy, it's not yet the case, probably because this is a growing sector, a growing asset class. So the most clever investors are looking both at the property element, but also at the management element, because it's key nowadays to see how it will develop. And on the long term, I see possibility that will evolve, as we have seen in other asset classes. If you think, for example, to the hotel, you may have a situation where you have the property investor which is only giving out his property, leasing it to somebody, then do its business completely. There are others that are going for a different model where they have a joint venture, a partnership with manager, and we have also the management agreement where all the investment remains on the owner, and the professional managers comes in order to take the most benefit out of the property. So I think it's early to say what the real development will be. Speaking of Italy nowadays, as I said, the investors are looking very much at the two elements, i.e. the property element and the management element, because they need to develop the asset class. They need to find a way to make it work. Going from a situation where the healthcare situation, where it's very much regulated, where you need authorization to run the business, to senior housing, which is completely unregulated, but you need to find the right mix to be attractive, to be interesting, particularly in a country where people is used to own his house. So there is also this switch. You are addressing, you are offering your products to people that own his house, probably has to decide whether to rent out his house or to sell his house, to move to a house that probably it will only rent because it's for a limited period of his life, or because the offer is for house to be rented. So it's an interesting situation right now.
In terms of investment opportunities in your sector, what do you think the most interesting ones are? You can skip that if you want, Davide, and say I'm a lawyer. Matthias.
I think the most interesting fact is that healthcare is turning to a major asset class. I think the market participants will become more interesting during this year, as many investors will join the market.
In Italy, talking of residential, for sure, the so-called thematic residentials, such as senior housing, assisted living, student housing, co-living, so all these type of thematic residentiality are for sure the mainstream of the future. In the sense that investors are moving from the more traditional residential offer to this new type of residential offers, which strongly integrated the service levels, the service offers within the real estate offer. So students, all the people, but more generally speaking, people who need to use the house for short period of time, or what we say based on the consumption, more than based on the property or ownership.
Okay, great. Ron.
Well, I've got two opportunities. The first one is senior housing integrated in the city. And the second one is specific facilities for people with dementia, because that's the most important disease we have to fight against, and we have to add some specific facilities for these people.
Okay, great.
In a nutshell, the attractiveness of this sector is mainly driven by long-term cash flows for investors and correlated to the economic cycles. And this is quite unique in the real estate compared to commercial real estate asset classes.
Okay, great.